I have learned in the quiet corners of consciousness where the mind loosens its grip on certainty that one of the most unsettling experiences a human being can face is realizing they are evolving faster than everyone around them. Not better, not superior, not chosen, just faster. A shift in perception that sweeps you forward while the world around you remains anchored in the familiar. And when that acceleration begins, when your awareness expands beyond the boundaries that once defined your identity, you discover a truth that is both liberating and terrifying. Evolution has a cost, and the cost is felt immediately. It's subtle at first, a slight distance between you and the people you love, a growing sensitivity to the unspoken vibrations in a room, a sensation that conversations you once enjoyed now feel strangely hollow, as if you're speaking through a thin veil that no one else realizes is there. You begin to sense patterns beneath the surface of ordinary life. You begin to see the invisible scaffolding holding the world together, the unconscious assumptions, the shared illusions, the quiet agreements that create what people call reality. Then something inside you whispers, you're stepping beyond it. And that is where the danger begins, because evolving faster than everyone around you doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like becoming a different species while trying to inhabit the same environment. The mismatch becomes painful. You start perceiving connections others dismiss. You start sensing pathways they don't believe exist. You start hearing the subtle hum of a larger, deeper reality that most people never learn to listen for. And suddenly you realize that your inner world has accelerated far beyond the outer one. You begin to live in two realities simultaneously. The first is the consensus world, the marketplace of roles, identities, routines, expectations, the place where everyone agrees on what matters, even if those agreements were never examined. The second is the expanded world, the one that reveals itself only when consciousness stretches beyond its conditioning. The world where intuition becomes a form of intelligence, where perception becomes multidimensional, where the boundaries of the self soften and the field of awareness spreads outward like ripples in a cosmic ocean. But these two realities vibrate at different frequencies, and trying to walk in both at once is like holding two tuning forks tuned to different notes. You feel the resonance, but you also feel the friction. And if you evolve too quickly, the friction becomes profound. People sense your shift, even if they can't explain it. They feel the silence between your thoughts. They feel your perception scanning more deeply than their words. They feel the subtle expansion in your presence, the way your awareness no longer fits neatly into the box they once placed you in. And this makes them uncomfortable, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your evolution threatens the stability of their reality. So they do what humans have always done when faced with what they don't understand. They pull you back. Not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear that your transformation is a mirror reflecting their stagnation. Fear that your insights undermine their certainties. Fear that your new trajectory will take you someplace they cannot follow. And this is where the loneliness begins. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of walking through life with a mind that perceives what others can't. The loneliness of noticing truths no one asked you to notice. The loneliness of seeing the architecture behind the illusion, while everyone else is content to admire the decorations on the stage. It is the loneliness of being ahead. And being ahead is not glamorous. It is destabilizing. It is disorienting. It shakes you to your core because you were not designed to evolve alone. Human consciousness is a collective field. When one of us rises too quickly, the field resists. It tries to correct you, normalize you, absorb you back into its center of gravity. You feel this pressure in conversations, in relationships, in expectations. You feel it in the tension between who you are becoming and who you are expected to remain. And this pressure forces you to confront a question most people never dare to ask. Can I continue expanding without losing everyone around me? This question doesn't come from ego. It comes from survival, because evolving means shedding old structures, and shedding means loss. And loss means stepping into an unknown where the familiar no longer feels like home. At some point, you start realizing that you are not just changing your thoughts, you are changing your frequency. Your body feels it. Your mind feels it. Your relationships feel it. The entire fabric of your life vibrates differently. And once this shift begins, you cannot reverse it. You cannot slow down. You cannot return to the smaller version of yourself that once fit comfortably in the expectations of others. The danger then is not the evolution itself. The danger is the gap it creates. The gap between you and the world as it is. The gap between your velocity and the pace of those around you. The gap between the consciousness you are stepping into and the consciousness that raised you. And as that gap widens, you begin to feel exposed, like a traveler who crossed the border into a new land but hasn't yet learned the language, a pioneer without a map, a consciousness extending beyond the limits of the collective field, sensing things others cannot sense, asking questions others cannot hear. You are no longer held in the warm coherence of the group. You are now at the frontier of your own mind, and that frontier is silent. In that silence, you face truths that destabilize everything you once took for granted. You begin to understand how fragile the structures of society are, how unconscious most human behavior is, how much of the world is built on repetition rather than awareness. And once you see this, you can no longer participate with the same innocence. This is the danger of evolving too fast. Not madness, not chaos, not the collapse of your identity, but the clarity that separates you from the world that raised you. And yet, even as this separation deepens, something extraordinary emerges. A new intelligence, a new sensitivity, a new way of being that is no longer dependent on collective validation. You begin to feel life itself guiding you. You begin to feel consciousness expanding you. You begin to feel your evolution as an inner inevitability, like a seed cracking open under pressure. And still, you know, there is no turning back. As your evolution accelerates, something strange begins to happen. You start noticing that your inner landscape is expanding faster than your ability to express what's occurring inside you. Your thoughts stretch into dimensions that language cannot fully contain. Your perceptions become too subtle, too intricate, too interconnected to compress back into ordinary conversation. And so you fall silent, not because you have nothing to say, but because what you now understand can no longer be expressed in the vocabulary of the world you came from. This silence is not peaceful at first. It is disorienting. It feels like standing in the middle of a crowded room while holding a secret you never asked for, a secret no one else even realizes exists. You watch people discuss their lives, their worries, their ambitions, and you realize that you have stepped beyond the architecture of those concerns. You see them with compassion, but also with a kind of estranged clarity. What once felt important now feels like a ritual you can no longer participate in, not out of rebellion but out of incompatibility. It is here that the real danger reveals itself. When you evolve faster than those around you, life begins to demand that you speak two different languages, the language of expansion and the language of the familiar. And the tension between these two languages can fracture you if you're not careful. You understand that most people cannot meet you at this new depth, and yet you must still find a way to meet them at theirs. This is the delicate balance of the awakened traveler, remaining grounded in a world that no longer matches the shape of your consciousness. And because you cannot fully translate your evolution, people begin to misinterpret you. They sense your detachment and mistake it for arrogance. They sense your introspection and mistake it for distance. They sense your clarity and mistake it for coldness. They sense your calm and mistake it for indifference. They feel the difference in your vibration, but they can't decode it. To them, it's simply unfamiliar, and unfamiliar often feels threatening, and so they project their fears onto you. Some will try to shrink you back into the version they remember. Some will try to pull you into old conversations, old conflicts, old dynamics. Some will insist you've lost yourself, when in truth, you've only begun to find yourself. They will not understand that your evolution is not a rejection of them. It is a natural unfolding of consciousness, an opening that refuses to close. But evolution does not ask for permission. It does not wait for consensus. It does not negotiate with comfort. It pulls you forward, even when your heart aches for the life you are leaving behind. As your awareness expands, you begin to perceive the collective field with a precision that startles you. You notice how people cling to identities as if they were lifeboats. You notice how much suffering is created by trying to maintain illusions. You notice how society rewards sameness and punishes deviation. And as you witness all this, a subtle sorrow grows within you. Not sadness for yourself, but sadness for the human condition. Because once you see the machinery behind the performance, it becomes impossible to unsee it. You start to recognize how deeply conditioned the human mind is, how reflexive its fears are, how desperately it needs structure, validation, belonging. And this recognition makes your evolution feel heavier, not lighter. You realize that awakening is not simply an expansion of consciousness. It is also the dismantling of everything that once gave you a sense of belonging. This dismantling is not dramatic. It happens quietly, gradually, like sand slipping through your fingers. A conversation that no longer resonates, a friendship that no longer aligns, a belief that no longer fits, a dream that no longer feels like yours. One by one, the old anchors fall away until you find yourself floating in a space that feels both infinite and frightening. And here, in this strange in-between, you finally confront the truth. To evolve is to die before you die, to shed the psychological shell that once protected you, to walk through the world without the armor of old identities, to stand exposed to a reality so vast that it humbles every part of who you thought you were. This exposure is the danger most people never speak about, because accelerating your evolution means stepping outside the invisible laws of the tribe. And the tribe does not easily forgive those who step beyond it, not because they wish you harm, but because your transformation disrupts the equilibrium they depend on. Your growth becomes a mirror they did not ask to look into. And human beings have always feared mirrors that reveal too much, so they withdraw, or they criticize, or they misunderstand, or they cling to the version of you that no longer exists. And you begin to live with the quiet grief of being unseen. It is a grief that does not come from ego. It comes from the longing to be understood by the world you once belonged to. But as this grief expands, something else begins to awaken within you. A new form of intelligence, a new way of sensing, a new relationship with existence itself. You start to understand that your evolution is not a defect. It is not a curse. It is not a fracture. It is a calling, a resonance, a pull from a deeper level of consciousness that is asking you to grow into the next version of yourself. And even if no one around you understands this process, your inner world begins to guide you with increasing clarity. You feel life reorganizing your path. You feel your intuition sharpening. You feel your awareness stabilizing. You feel your solitude transforming itself into a kind of sanctuary, not because you chose to separate from others, but because the frequency of your consciousness demanded a new environment in which to expand. And once you reach this point, something irreversible happens. You begin to trust the evolution itself, even when it isolates you, even when it confuses you, even when it challenges everything you thought you were. Because at the deepest level, you sense that your expansion is not random. It is intelligent, it is precise, it is guided, and it is necessary. As your evolution continues to accelerate, you begin to notice something even more disorienting. The distance between your inner reality and the outer world keeps widening, and no amount of explanation can bridge it. You try, gently, carefully, sincerely, to share fragments of what you're experiencing, a glimpse of the new awareness, a hint of the expanded perception, a quiet observation that arises from your deeper clarity. But the moment your words reach the ears of others, you see the confusion in their eyes, the discomfort in their posture, the subtle withdrawal in their energy. It isn't personal, it's vibrational. You are speaking from a frequency they have not yet accessed, and so your truth lands like a foreign language. They hear the sound but not the meaning. They sense the shift but not the depth. They feel the change but not the context. And gradually, you stop trying. Not because you no longer care, but because you finally understand something painful yet liberating. Awakening is an internal event that cannot be externally validated. And when you evolve faster than the collective, you enter a stage where your insights must be tended to in silence, like a fragile flame protected from the wind of misunderstanding. This silence becomes both your refuge and your burden. You carry truths inside you that feel too large for your previous life. You sense the interconnectedness of everything. You see how consciousness shapes reality. You feel the subtle textures of existence, vibrations, intentions, emotional currents, energetic fields. And with this expanded sensitivity, you also feel how asleep most people are, how tightly they cling to the narrative of who they believe they must be. This is where the isolation deepens. Not because you want distance, but because you realize that awakening separates you from the world not in space, but in perception. You are still physically present, still sharing the same streets, the same rooms, the same conversations. But spiritually, cognitively, energetically, you are elsewhere. You are perceiving from a vantage point others have not yet reached, and they cannot see what you now see. And there is danger in being unseen. Because when others can't understand your inner evolution, they begin to interpret your transformation through the lens of their own fears. They project their insecurities onto you. They label what they cannot categorize. They question what they cannot comprehend. And in their attempts to preserve the familiar, they try, consciously or not, to pull you back into the shape you once held. They want the old you, the predictable you, the version of you that matched their worldview. But the old you is gone, dissolved into a consciousness too wide to fit back into the past. And so you face another dilemma. Do you shrink to preserve connection? Or do you expand, knowing it may cost you the warmth of familiarity? This is one of the great spiritual crossroads. To continue evolving means accepting the temporary wilderness that comes with it. It means letting go of the approval that once comforted you. It means stepping into a reality where your primary source of validation comes from inner alignment, not outer reassurance. And this shift awakens a new kind of courage within you, the courage to let yourself be misunderstood, the courage to walk forward even when no one walks with you, the courage to honor your evolution even when others resist it, the courage to trust a path that unfolds from within, not from consensus. And yet, in this courageous solitude, you discover something that wasn't obvious at first. Your evolution is not trying to isolate you, it is preparing you for relationships built on resonance, not convenience, preparing you for conversations built on depth, not habit, preparing you for a life aligned with your expanded awareness. This preparation is subtle but profound. Your intuition grows sharper, your perception becomes more precise, your emotional body becomes more refined. Your connection to the field of consciousness becomes more stable. You begin to understand that every stage of expansion requires a shedding, a release of old identities, old beliefs, old dynamics. And though these releases are painful, they are also necessary. You cannot carry old density into higher states of awareness. You cannot bring outdated attachments into a new frequency. You cannot evolve and remain the same. And so life begins to dismantle everything that anchors you to the past. Not out of cruelty, but out of alignment. People drift away, circumstances shift, opportunities dissolve, patterns collapse. And at first you mistake this dismantling for loss. But then you realize it is clearing space for new relationships that match your consciousness, clearing space for experiences that resonate with your new vibration, clearing space for a life shaped by awareness, not conditioning. This clearing is not gentle, it is precise, powerful, deliberate. It strips away illusions you once depended on. It forces you to confront the parts of yourself still attached to safety. It removes every layer that cannot survive the frequency you are stepping into. And this stripping leaves you exposed, raw, vulnerable, unprotected by the old narratives that once held you together. You walk through the world like a being reborn, with senses open, intuition heightened, perception unfiltered. This exposure is the true danger of evolving faster than everyone around you. You lose the armor of the unconscious. You can no longer hide from yourself. You can no longer ignore what is misaligned. You can no longer pretend to be who you once were. Your evolution demands transparency, inner and outer. It demands integrity. It demands presence. And through this demand, something remarkable begins to occur. Your solitude transforms into strength. Your sensitivity becomes intelligence. Your clarity becomes direction. Your isolation becomes initiation. You begin to understand that evolution is not just an expansion. It is a refinement of perception, a purification of identity, a reconfiguration of consciousness. And what once felt like danger now begins to reveal itself as destiny. As your evolution accelerates beyond the familiar edges of your old life, something profound, and often shocking, begins to unfold inside you. You realize that you cannot return to who you were, not even temporarily, not even to make others comfortable. The self you once inhabited has dissolved like mist in sunlight, and now you stand in the open air of a reality that refuses to fit the limits of your former identity. What was once stable now feels fragile. What was once certain now reveals itself as illusion. What once defined you now feels impossibly small. This is where the true turbulence begins. Because awakening is not merely an expansion, it is a dismantling, a stripping away, a demolition of the psychological structures that anchored you to the consensus world. And this demolition drops you into a phase that mystics throughout history have known well: the in-between, the liminal space, the undefined territory where the old is dead but the new is not yet born. It is a place without reference points, without familiar coordinates, without the comforting walls of old beliefs. And in that open, trembling space, you feel as if you are floating between worlds, too awakened to return, too unsteady to move forward. This is the moment where most people panic, and understandably so, because nothing in ordinary life prepares you for what happens when your consciousness outgrows your environment, when your perception becomes too wide for the collective script, when the structures that once shaped your identity crumble beneath the weight of your awareness. You begin to question everything: your relationships, your values, your dreams, your past, your future, even the sense of you that once seemed obvious. And when you attempt to share this internal earthquake with others, they do not understand, because they cannot. They hear your words but cannot feel the frequency behind them. They see your face but cannot comprehend the dissolution occurring behind your eyes. They witness your changes but cannot decode the evolutionary force driving them. Eventually you stop trying to explain, not out of bitterness but out of clarity. There is a certain kind of knowledge that can only be transmitted through experience, and evolution is one of them. You cannot give someone your vantage point. You cannot transfer your perception. You cannot compress your expanded awareness into words small enough to fit another person's worldview. This is when the separation becomes undeniable. People who once felt close now feel distant. Conversations that once nourished you now drain you. Plans that once excited you now feel like distractions. Environments that once felt normal now feel energetically incompatible. You are no longer synchronized with the rhythm of those around you. You are vibrating at a different frequency altogether. And even if you don't speak of it, they sense it. People always sense evolution, even if they cannot interpret it. They see it in your eyes, which now hold a depth they cannot follow. They hear it in your silence, which now carries more truth than your words ever did. They feel it in your presence, which now radiates an awareness that unsettles their unconscious patterns. Some respond by pulling away, some by criticizing, some by attempting to correct you, some by pretending nothing has changed, some by resenting your new clarity, some by fearing your new independence. And you feel all of this intensely, because evolving quickly sharpens your sensitivity. You pick up subtle shifts in tone, micro-expressions, emotional currents, energetic tension. Things others dismiss as nothing register in you like seismic waves. You feel every unsaid thought, every hidden discomfort, every unconscious resistance. This sensitivity is both a gift and a burden. A gift because it deepens your connection to truth. A burden because it exposes the fragility of most relationships, the ones built not on resonance, but on familiarity. And this realization forces you into a painful but necessary acceptance. You cannot evolve and remain in the same relational configurations. The architecture of your life must change, not because you want it to, not because you choose it, but because expansion demands it. This is the part of the process no one romanticizes, the nights where you sit quietly, feeling the ache of separation building inside you, the days where you walk through routines that no longer make sense, as if acting in a play whose script you've outgrown, the conversations where your soul feels absent, hovering somewhere far beyond the words being exchanged, the loneliness that arrives not from being alone, but from being unrecognized. And yet, amid this disorientation, something unexpected emerges, a new clarity, a clarity that comes not from the mind, but from the deeper intelligence awakening within you. You begin to understand why the old life had to fall away, why the old relationships had to shift, why the old structures had to dissolve. You see that your evolution is not a punishment, it is an invitation into a new level of coherence, a new level of authenticity, a new level of alignment with consciousness itself. And this is when the loneliness begins to transform, slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. The emptiness becomes space, the silence becomes guidance, the solitude becomes sanctuary. The uncertainty becomes possibility, and you realize that what felt like losing everything was actually the preparation for something you haven't met yet, a community aligned with your frequency, a life shaped by truth rather than expectation, a reality that matches the depth you've grown into. This is the paradox of evolving faster than everyone around you. The very process that isolates you is also the one that sets you free. And freedom, true freedom, always begins in the space where the old world no longer fits. As your evolution stabilizes into a new center of awareness, something begins to shift inside you, subtly at first, then with unmistakable clarity. You realize that the loneliness you felt was not a sign that you were on the wrong path. It was a sign that you were shedding the final layers of the life that no longer matched your consciousness. The silence around you becomes less threatening. The distance between you and others becomes less painful. A deeper peace begins to seep into your inner world, not because anything outside has changed, but because you have. And for the first time, you understand that evolution is not about escaping the world, but about seeing through it. The structures that once intimidated you now appear transparent. The judgments that once wounded you now dissolve before reaching your heart. The misunderstandings that once confused you now reveal themselves as projections, nothing more. The separation that once tormented you now feels like a necessary stage of purification. You begin to view everything, every conflict, every loss, every uncomfortable moment, as part of the architecture of awakening. Nothing feels random anymore. Nothing feels accidental. You sense an intelligence behind each twist and turn of your path, as if life itself has been sculpting you from within, guiding you through expansions and contractions, breaking you open only to rebuild you stronger and clearer. And then, something even more surprising begins to happen. You feel yourself becoming whole. Not the kind of wholeness society teaches, confidence, productivity, success, but an inner wholeness that comes from integrating every part of who you've become. You no longer feel the need to hide your depth. You no longer feel compelled to explain your insights. You no longer shrink yourself to preserve relationships. Your presence becomes grounded, stable, unmistakably aligned with the frequency of your expanded awareness. This integration marks the end of the in-between stage. You are no longer hovering between identities. You are no longer dissolving. You are emerging. And in this emergence, something miraculous takes place. Life begins bringing you the people who resonate with your new frequency. It starts subtly. A stranger who speaks a language you thought only existed in your mind. A conversation that feels immediately familiar. An encounter that carries the signature of synchronicity. You begin to meet people who understand intuitively what you've been through. They don't need explanations. They don't need context. Their consciousness is tuned to the same wavelength as yours, and so you recognize each other instantly, not through words, but through presence. This is the new community that awakening prepares you for. It is not loud. It is not obvious. It does not announce itself with celebration. It appears in whispers, in coincidences, in quiet alignments. It appears when you no longer cling to the old world, when you no longer seek validation from those who cannot see you. It appears when your solitude has carved you into someone capable of recognizing real resonance. And when this new community forms, even if only one person at first, you understand something essential. You were never meant to walk your evolution alone. You were meant to outgrow the old in order to find the ones who live at the level you were evolving toward. This is the hidden purpose behind the loneliness. It is not abandonment, it is preparation. It is not exile, it is refinement. It is not punishment, it is alignment. You begin to notice that your presence now affects others differently. You bring calm where there was confusion. You bring clarity where there was tension. You bring depth where there was superficiality. And without trying, without forcing, without preaching, your evolution becomes a silent invitation for others to rise as well. Some will, some won't. Both are perfect. You understand now that awakening is not about convincing anyone of anything. It is about becoming a lighthouse, not chasing ships, but standing firmly in your truth so that those navigating the darkness can find their way when they're ready. And in this understanding, compassion blossoms. You look at those who once resisted your evolution and feel no resentment. You see their fears clearly. You see their conditioning. You see the limits of their inner architecture. And instead of feeling separate from them, you feel a deeper connection, because you too once lived inside those limits. There is no superiority in awakening, only responsibility. Responsibility to remain true to what you've discovered. Responsibility to live with integrity even when misunderstood. Responsibility to honor the path that life has carved through you. Responsibility to keep evolving, even when the pace terrifies you. And you begin to see that the danger of evolving faster than everyone around you was never the isolation itself. The real danger was believing that the isolation meant you were unworthy, broken, lost, or wrong. But now you understand. Your evolution was never a divergence, it was a calling, a pulse from the deeper layers of consciousness guiding you toward a life that matches the truth of who you are. The old world had to fall away so that you could finally step into your own frequency. The old relationships had to shift so that new ones could find you. The old identity had to dissolve so that your authentic self could breathe. And you realize that the very path that once felt like danger now reveals itself as liberation. Because what you gain when you evolve faster than everyone around you is not loneliness. It is freedom. Freedom from illusion, freedom from conditioning, freedom from the smallness you once mistook for identity. And once you taste this freedom, you understand with absolute certainty, you were never losing anything real. You were only losing what was too small to contain who you were becoming.